Missing for days in the storm. How this ends tonight.
Giga. I'm a senior machine learning engineer at a security company based in California. It's called Sumo Logic. So generally, like they have since we're dealing with like customer security data, um, the adoption of AI coding assistants has been maybe a little bit slower compared to other companies just because of the security concerns. But right now, our work is all in on Cloud Code. Um, and part of it is also licensing. It's not necessarily security. So our company wouldn't use something like Cursor, not necessarily because Cursor is not secure or anything. It's as secure as Cloud Code, but it's just a licensing issue. But I've used a lot of these coding assistants in personal projects as well. Um, but I don't come from a place where I'm like an expert in coding assistants. I just use them quite often. So I would like to hear from all of you as well on what you find useful, what you find not useful, etc. Cloud Code is definitely like a very mainstream tool nowadays for coders. Um, Whereas like other tools may have lost some popularity as of recent. So all of these AI coding assistants and AI tools in general are kind of almost waxing and waning. There's different trends that are popping up. Certain coding tools, assistants are becoming popular or are fading as well. So we'll kind of go over that. Um, the agenda is why coding assistants. I'll kind of go over what AI coding assistants entails. What are the types of coding assistants? So there's different ways you can interact with coding assistants. I'll go over which all of those interfaces. Um, and then some dive into Cloud Code in particular, such as foundations, customizability, and community support. I'll demo. Um, I I thought about demoing like different Cloud Code setups. I actually haven't quite ran the demo myself, just because some of them involves like demoing like setting up certain aspects, and setting up is like a one-time thing. So once you set up, let's say a plugin for Cloud Code, it's kind of difficult to uninstall and demo it again. Um, and then I'm also on a kind of laptop or computer where I've just recently downloaded Cloud Code. But on my work laptop and other personal devices, I've been using Cloud Code more extensively, so I have a lot more custom setup on those devices. And then I also want to hear from you on what you find useful and not useful. And then I also want to hear like what coding assistants you yourself are using. So why AI coding assistants? So I'm gonna make the distinction that AI coding assistance is not vibe coding. So vibe coding, like tools like Lovable, is very popular. I would say it's more so for prototyping. Like you can, if I'm a business-minded person, I would use Lovable. Um, Whereas if I'm a developer, I wouldn't use Lovable as much. I don't use Lovable as much. Mainly because it's great for getting your ideas and actualizing your ideas, like if you have like a website in mind. But at the same time, uh, the code that comes out of Vibe code may not be like super reliable and scalable and productionizable. So what that means is like if you're to actually onboard customers onto like a Vibe coded app, it may break um in many different ways. So in general, like vibe coding is great, but it's not, it has its place, but it's not um gonna produce like productionizable code that we as developers need to produce. So I would say it's more so for like de-risking business ideas and prototyping. Um, and then, but why use AI coding assistants as opposed to developing manually? So AI coding assistants are very efficient, and you can deliver features much faster in production. Um, but there are also concerns because you're speeding up your velocity. One is with anything like high velocity is going to lead to higher risk of safety issues. These are not just security issues, but it can also be things like the reliability of the system and dependability of your software, which is a huge concern because software uh, powers a lot of our infrastructure. And so what happens if our infrastructure is unreliable? The things built on top of that infrastructure will also be impacted. So that could be things like, let's say someone used an AI coding assistant to code something complex like a distributed system algorithm. Um, you could have things um, like banks overcharging you or charging you twice, let's say, or any payment app. So those are all examples of like things that can go wrong with vibe coding, and not to mention like physical safety. Things like autopilot, for example, can also be regressed due to vibe coding in ways that we might not expect. So in general, like there is a concern for AI coding assistants. Um, but one thing to keep in mind is that we as developers have to keep the safety standards, even if we're not manually coding um, in the age of AI coding. And I just want to kind of emphasize like part of the reason why like AI coding has been popular as well is because companies and management have also pushed AI coding onto their employees as a way to increase velocity. So my company, but not just my company, other companies have also kind of been pushing their developers into using AI coding assistants. Um, and that's been a great thing, but it's also, yeah, we also need to acknowledge the concerns with that. So I kind of divided AI coding assistants into kind of three categories. So these three categories are basically ways that you interact with the AI coding assistant. So it's not necessarily defining the capability of the AI. It's more so defining how do you interact with these coding assistants. So the first one I would describe as IDE or AI plugins. So these are like GitHub Copilot, where it's supplementing an existing developer workflow. So like for example, VS Code with AI. So it's like AI plugin into the existing developer workflow. And usually people will use that. How people will interact with that is that they would like pay for or the company pays for GitHub Copilot. You install that plugin in VS Code, and then when you're typing in VS Code, Copilot is auto-completing for you. It's writing the next function that needs to be written, for example. It does completions, it does suggestions. So usually small snippets of code. You're usually not, you can chat with Copilot, GitHub Copilot, but usually the way people interact with GitHub Copilot the most is by completion. So it's not prompting, you're not prompting GitHub Copilot. It's like almost like autocomplete on steroids. And then you also have other examples of Amazon Q Developer, Tab9. I haven't really used these two tools. And then there's the AI native IDEs. So at a certain point, the so IDE stands for Integrated Developer Environment. It's basically or editor. I actually don't know what the E stands for, but it's basically a text editor for code. Um, at some point, companies were like, okay, so everyone's installing these plugins into IDEs. So why don't we just create like, our own IDE that has AI built in? So that's what's called AI native IDEs. Um, and examples of that are Cursor, Anti-Gravity, Replit AI. So you no longer have to install the AI into the IDE. The IDE should come with AI built in. Part of the benefit is that you have more ways to interact with the AI agent or AI the large language model that you previously didn't have with a plugin. So there's more chat capabilities. Maybe there's more tooling available because the AI is exposed to more features of the editor itself. And also the editor, like the developers that build like Cursor, for example, build features knowing that they'll be used with AI assistance. So that's part of the benefit of like AI native IDEs as opposed to AI plugins. And then so it's not just an extension of the IDE, it's the IDE is AI is integrated into the IDE itself. Um, Lastly, there's coding assistants, so coding agents. So these are agents that aid coding tasks through multi-step reasoning and sub-agent orchestration. I'll tell you what that means later on. But usually, like for example, Cloud Code and Deep Agents, the primary way that people interact with coding agents is through terminal. So through the command line. Uh, And usually these agents can be long running tasks. You can have multiple agents running at the same time doing different tasks. They can be working 24/7. You can basically create like an organization of sub agents and orchestrate them to be working on your project. So a lot of customizability when it comes to coding agents. Um, and that's part of the benefit. I should note that in terms of capability, all of these like coding assistants are kind of they're either complementary. So I would say like GitHub Copilot and Cloud Code are kind of complementary because Cloud Code is mostly for like if you want an assistant to do a task and code it for you. Whereas GitHub Copilot is like if you're manually going in and surgically like changing code, GitHub Copilot can help you with the auto completion process. So I would say in some ways it's complementary because they're doing different things at different levels. Copilot is a lot like it's not quite doing a task for you, but it's trying to infer maybe what should be written or what should be changed and making those suggestions. Whereas Cloud Code is a lot more high level. It's doing a lot more of a it can do the brainstorming, it can do the coding, it can do a lot of things. But in terms of other like assistants in the middle, like Cursor, it's becoming a lot it's moving towards like being Cloud Code level in terms of tool usage and capabilities and customizability. So I would say like you in general use what you're comfortable with because at the end of the day we don't know which like assistant or tool will win out in the end. Um, Cursor has lost some popularity. Replit AI has also lost some popularity recently, and then Windsurf has also lost some popularity, but that doesn't mean that they're not going to come back later on. Any questions?
Yeah, I had a quick question, Riley.
Yes.
So, isn't it possible to get Claude Code to integrate into an IDE? No,
Yes.
like
Yeah.
JetBrains, and so there's some overlap in some of the description,
Yes.
right?
Mhm. Yeah.
And and Claude Code. I know Codex and I assume Cloud Code you can use at the command line, but they also have web interfaces or they have apps. They certainly have
Mhm.
an Cloud Code has an app for Mac now that you
Yeah.
can download and
Yes.
install. So okay, all right, yeah, that's what I was not sure of. I've never used it within an IDE, and so I
Mhm.
was kind of curious about that. Yeah, so I was just curious about that.
Yeah, I
Thanks.
don't really use Cloud Code in the IDE. Like I know some people do, or like they have it do some auto completions, but primarily like the way 90% of people interact with Cloud Code is either via terminal or its own app.
Right, right.
Um,
And I mean, for me, Claude Code sometime last fall in September or October, there was a big improvement in the way Claude Code operated, and
mhm.
it hasn't really declined for me since last fall. Whereas like you said, it always everything ebbs and flows, right? They always
Yeah.
change. Um, I haven't had a lot of success with anti-gravity, I tried a bunch of these, but right now for me at least, Cloud Code has actually been the most efficient
Mhm.
and really useful.
Yes. And then another thing is like the model capability, like Cloud Code um has access. Well, I think a lot of these models are these assistants have access to different models,
Right,
but Cloud Code has access to Opus 4.5, which is a very good coding
right,
model,
right,
um, but also kind of expensive.
right. And I know people have talked about using Cloud Code and with some other local models like
Mhm.
using Olama or something. But I can't imagine if the model is not as good as Opus that it's going to be as useful because I haven't had a lot of success with any of the local
Mhm.
coding models either.
Yes,
Um,
yes.
so okay,
Yeah. So in general, there's overlap between all of these tools. It's really getting used to a tool and being able to customize it. That's the
right,
major win with like things like Cloud Code and Cursor. Um, so it's not really a matter of like deciding which tool is best. It's really like picking a tool, getting familiar with it, being able to customize it to your like standards and your comfortability. I'm gonna give a very quick recap of agents. I talked about it in maybe the last meetup in August or September. But what is an agent in comparison to like an LLM? So when you use like ChatGPT, you're interacting with an LLM directly. But with agents, it's really a layer on top of a large language model. So the large language model in this case is it's only doing reasoning um, a lot of the time. So you give it some input. It could be a complex task, and they'll try to reason what the plan should be for that task. So what should I do next? And then they'll do some action, observe the result, and then go back to the large language model to ask, what should I do next, given that I observed XYZ? So this action is usually either a tool call, but nowadays it could be a skill, or can also invoke another agent. But this action is usually like a, at the very like base level, it's a function call. So it'll call a function to do some action. For example, like a previous difficulty with a lot of large language models in 2021 was counting the number of R's in strawberry. That was like a famous example. Um, and part of the solution was like instead of having relying on the AI to do that, have the AI kind of outsource that capability by calling code that has been vetted and verified, and then using that code to answer for them. So that's kind of the whole idea of tool calling. It's like if the agent doesn't know something, it basically can outsource to like an API or to another app to kind of answer the user request. So if it needs to know the weather, it'll look at a weather app, let's say. If it needs to search the web, it can search Google. So that's the whole idea of agents, is that it has the capability to call tools. And also nowadays, I'll talk about it later, but there's also skills and sub-agents as well. Yeah, that's basically the overview. I should mention that a lot of like if you go to ChatGPT or if you go to Claude nowadays, a lot of those LLMs are basically agents under the hood. Because they do allow you to do tool calls. They also allow you to customize the system prompt. So at the end of the day, like they're basically agents, but maybe a little bit more lightweight than Claude Code. And by that I mean is if you ever use Claude Code versus ChatGPT, Claude Code is going to call a whole lot more tools than ChatGPT, and it's going to do a whole lot more pivoting. Like if a tool doesn't work or if like there's an issue with a certain tool or maybe the answer is not what it expects, it can pivot based off of that tool call. And that's very helpful for coding because one thing is like I use Cloud Code to run tests as well. And when it sees the test not passing, it knows, okay, I need to change XYZ about the code. So that's one of the benefits of having an agent in comparison to just using an LLM, is this ability to pivot based off of things like testing the code. Some highlights and lowlights. I kind of talked about this already, but in general, like there's a lot of overlap between all of these tools. So they may have their best and worst uses for now, but in the future it may change. Things may converge. All of these tools are getting more powerful, so they're all converging to a coding agent, basically. I'm going to dive into Cloud Code just to give you an idea of the capabilities of a coding agent in case you haven't used it. I won't go too deep into Cloud Code, but I'll give an overview. So this is going to be a little bit more hands-on portion. So yeah, I mentioned Cloud Code. I mostly use it in the terminal. Um, um, And some overview of the features. I just realized I was not in presentation mode. But some overview of the features is that it can hold context, so contextual generation and control. So not only can you does Cloud Code keep memory of your like code or your repository. Not only does Cloud Code keep memory of your repository, um, you can also control the memory and the context in which Cloud Code uses in the conversation. So that's one thing that maybe is different from like interacting with ChatGPT, is this ability to control the memory of the agent. And I'll show you what that means. So you can tell Cloud Code like, oh, pay attention to this part of the repository, or make sure that you're following this style standard. And that could be specified. You don't need to know how to code to specify that. You can just do it in a markdown file in natural language, in plain English. And then there's also customizability. So Cloud Code offers several options for customizability. So things like tools that Cloud Code can use. So these are custom functions. You can do slash commands, so custom commands that Cloud Code can use. Yeah, Cloud Code does index, not in the traditional indexing way that that might be like more standard in database systems. Um, its indexing is basically reading like a whole bunch of files and then like kind of summarizing them in the markdown file. That's usually the extent of indexing. Actually, they may do more under the hood, but that's like I guess that's what Cloud Code exposes to the user is this markdown file. And I'll show this markdown file on a kind of toy repository that I kind of pulled. So yeah, I mentioned tools slash commands are any like custom commands that you build into Claude. It also does skills. I'll talk more about what skills mean, but they're basically capabilities that the agent can do, written or described in either natural language or a common format is also you give it like a chart on almost a flow chart on like if then this then do that. That's mainly how we specify skills. And then there's also sub agents. So these are custom agents that can work asynchronously. So I use sub agents a lot through plugins. So sub agents, basically, if I have like a task that I want Cloud Code to do and it's maybe quite big, it'll break up that task and then assign it to a sub agent. The sub agent will work on that task in its own work tree. And then at the end, the work of all of these agents, sub agents, will get merged together. So that's kind of like almost the agent orchestration part of Cloud Code. So Cloud Code itself is an agent, but it can also act as a like orchestrator of sub agents. So that's really cool because it's almost like you have an entire organization of sub agents working under you. And then there's also community support. So part of the power of a tool is not just its capabilities that come out of the box, it's also what the community builds around the tool. So Cloud Code has a lot of like powerful plugins that other developers have built that you can easily install into Claude. And then also things like you can add MCP servers. So this allows the agent to talk to the outside world, but it can be token inefficient as well. Depending on the MCP server, certain servers will give you like a whole bunch of tokens. And I mean, yeah. In general, like if you're using something like Opus, you're going to care about tokens because that's going to directly impact how much you're paying sometimes. Or how much Cloud Code is going to limit you in the future. So the basics. So I'll go over some of these basics. So there's different types of memory in Claude. So there's project memory. So this is any memory that has to do with the repository itself. So this particular project you're working on. So yeah, this is at the repository level. For example, like if the repository I'm going to show is like a very basic bare bones shell that's being implemented. And then yeah, so project memory is basically the memory that is global to this repository, or it's available to anyone working in this repository. So usually you'll commit, if you're using GitHub, Git, you'll commit this claude.md file. There's also user memory. So user memory sits outside of project memory on your computer. So this is going to be like in your home directory, um, under the .claude. There's usually a .claude directory in your home directory, and this is like primarily memory about you as the user. So like maybe your preferences, maybe your style of coding, things that your workflow that you want it to memorize. Cloud Code can store that in user memory. Whereas project memory is more about the specific project you're working on. So what are you trying to do? What is the code base trying to do? What is the goal of the code base? What are the open issues that you know about? What is the style, coding style that you want every developer to follow who's working on your project? That's all in Cloud MD. And then you can also have like sub markdown files um, as well. But in general, like, yeah, there's going to be two types of memory. You can add information to memory by using the pound sign in the terminal. So it'll tell you if you want to add to project or user memory. There used to be another type of memory called um, user, uh, basically project local memory. So this is project memory that you as the user, that's local to you as the user. So no developer that's working on the project will have this memory. Um, but they got rid of it. Um, I should mention that user memory uh, is applies to all of the projects on your laptop. Whereas the previous memory I talked about, which is project local memory, is local to the project and the user, if that makes sense. So when you do the hashtag commands, I can do that with anything. So if I can just start Claude code. So there's this, I typed in /init, and then it's just saying that Claude.md already exists, but /init basically creates this Claude MD file. It's almost like indexing your repository, and it's creating this overview. So this is a toy example, so it's like a build your own shell, gives you an overview, it gives you important commands, it does an architecture overview. This file is very short because it's a very toy project. Just to give you a hands-on notion of what it's doing. And then you can also say like things like so this hashtag means that it's going to save to memory. So you say, let's say this repository is in Python, so follow that 8 standards. So this will save it to memory. That says, do you want to edit claude.md? It's just adding this line to claude.md. It says yes. And so make the change. I haven't really subbed any permissions at the moment, but you can also I'll talk about permissions later. But it basically saved this, but so you can write anything like anything you want to enforce other developers to follow. And then anytime that Cloud Code is writing code, it'll pull up this file and then make sure that it's following or it's compliant with this MD file. So now that we have that, we want to follow these standards. Whenever it's writing code, it'll follow the Pepe standard, let's say. That's just an example. But in general, it can be a very useful feature. So doing an @ sign at a file will add it to the context. So it makes you're making sure when you're talking to Claude that it's looking at this file or this directory. And then you can do things like compact, which will summarize like the conversation history and the current context. when you're and then also do clear. So clear is when you want to kind of start a new conversation um with new context. I didn't talk about permissions, but in general, there's this if you do slash permissions, you can add a rule, let's say, and then let's just do this. So basically it'll allow you that whenever it's doing like a list command in bash, um you're going to allow it automatically. So it's not going to ask you like, oh, do you approve this command or not? It's just going to run the command on its own. So that's what permissions does. So there's three types of permissions. Most things are asked by default. So if it doesn't have a rule, it's going to be asked by default. Ask means that it's going to ask you when it runs the tool. Then there's allow, which is not going to ask you. And then deny, which is automatically going to be blocked. Let me turn on. And then this will be saved in a settings.json file, so you see the rule here. For example, like you don't want to allow Cloud Code to remove files usually. I don't allow Cloud Code to remove files. So I'll have like a rule that says if you're removing something, ask me. Because that's not something I'm gonna allow by default. Because it might do like a remove RF or it could like delete a whole component, let's say, of your repository. So in general, like you want to set these permissions to your based on what you're comfortable with. Yeah. Okay. So those are the basics. Any questions about that? The basics? Okay, and then there's customizability. So this is where Cloud Code gets interesting. So you can define slash commands, you can define skills and sub-agents. So slash commands are custom commands. You know how I was typing commands in Cloud Code like slash permissions? You can tell Cloud Code to write new commands. For example, like write a new slash command to check coding style, let's say. So this will create a new command. Yeah. That's part of the hard part about not setting up permissions beforehand is that it'll ask you to do everything. So it created this commands folder. Yeah. It's going to create this commands folder and then you see like this check style command. So basically you can and it knows pep8 because it read my cloud.md file. But in general, it'll check all Python files for these conventions. So if I did, so I think I have to load it first. Let me just exit. So if you type exit, that's gonna get you out. Oh,
So when you first set up this, does it take a little while? Because I was just installing Claude Code before. I just ran all my code just through straight up Claude, but I'm seeing it's creating entire file structures. But does it
mhm.
take a while to give its first like command? I'm just wanting to analyze current website and get like basically start building it again. But it's kind of stuck on the first spot.
Some commands will take a while depending on what tool calls it's doing. Like if it's an expensive tool call, that's usually what's gonna take Claude a long time. Or if it's context heavy. So if you see like the tokens are piling up when it's running,
Yeah.
um, when it's running these commands, that means that it's probably running out of context, and so that might make Cloud Code take long.
Okay, thank you.
So if I did flash code check style, this is the command that it created. I can also like modify this quite a bit, just to be in line with other style conventions of maybe my company, let's say. And then it has I'll put like these are the violations according to these roles. So yeah, those are slash commands. And then skills are also not that different. So the way I would distinguish slash commands and skills is skills are usually called automatically by the agent, whereas slash commands are going to be manually called by you as the user. So if I want to check style without me having to write that command, I can write a skill for it. So write a skill checking code style. So you'll see this in a lot of repositories is that usually they'll have like if there's a functionality that they want to have in multiple places, they'll write it as like slash command and a skill. So update it updated the command. So it didn't quite do what I wanted it to do, but yeah, the whole point is it's gonna write oh it did. So this isn't usually the convention that I follow, but usually it'll be like a skill and then it'll have like a directory and then it'll have a skill.md file. Um, but I think this is fine as well. So this is so it wrote a skill for checking the coding style. So basically a skill is it's what's called progressive disclosure. So what progressive disclosure means that you're giving the agent instructions, but sometimes if you overload the agent with too many instructions or run out of context window, it might forget instructions that and it might not need all of the instructions that you give it. Because some of those instructions may be conditional on like on what you're trying to do, the task you're trying to do. Maybe some of it might be conditional on the tool responses that it sees when it's running. So progressive disclosure means that the instructions in the skill are not given to the agent unless the agent needs those capabilities. So the agent will have a description of what a skill entails, maybe a tiny description like, oh, this skill checks for coding style. This skill will check if the code is compliant with your cloud.md file. So it's a short description of the skill. And then when it reads this description and then it compares it to what the task that it's trying to achieve, it'll say, okay, I need more information about that capability. In that case, it'll load that skill MD file into your context. So the skill MD file is not like a system prompt. System prompt is always there in your conversation context. A skill.md file will get loaded as needed. So it's up to the agent to identify when it needs a skill And then when it needs that skill, it'll actually look at those instructions. So it's in some ways it's like RAG. Yeah, it is like a tool call for context. So that is a good way of looking at it. It's like I'm calling a tool to get more instructions about what I can do. And I have examples of skills. So these are ones written by Anthropic themselves. So you have like a skill.md file. You have a short description of what the skill can do. And so when it needs that skill, like when it needs to do front-end design, let's say, then it'll load all of these instructions into the context about typography, color and theme, motion. So you can have an agent that knows how to do a lot of things, but doesn't get overwhelmed with instructions because you're not giving all the instructions at once. It's really going to do a tool call to basically retrieve these instructions. The yeah, the other thing is that the skill.md file, yeah, is loaded as needed by the tool call. So if you're doing like backend stuff, this skill will not be called, like this front end design skill is not going to be retrieved. So yeah, it's really like lazy loading for instructions. That's kind of it's like a fancy term for that. And then sub-agents. So sub-agents are like a kind of combination of skills and tools. They're really just like instructions themselves. So
Do you think would be worth talking?
so was that? Yeah, so agents, one of the things about agents is that they can run in parallel. So you can use you can actually use slash commands and skills to orchestrate agents. So agents, these sub-agents can be invoked with a slash command or can be invoked with a skill itself. So if you tell Cloud Code, like I want you to have a skill to do code reviews, that code review skill can say, okay, to review the code or to review this PR, I have to kick off a whole bunch of agents. One agent that does XYZ and another agent that looks at the GitHub history, let's say. So that's really what we mean by agent orchestration. Yeah, and then this whole idea of agent orchestration and slash commands is going to come in handy when we talk about plugins. So plugins are basically third-party skills, third-party sub-agents, and third-party slash commands that you can load into Claude. So some popular plugins is slash code review, which is the plugin that I think it's Claude Anthropic created. So if I do like slash plugins, I'll get different plugins, code review. And then it says install user scope, installing project scope. So user scope would be applied to any project on my laptop that's specific to me as a user. And project scope would be any developer that's using this project or that's contributing to the project. If you commit it to GitHub. So I'm going to install it in the user. It tells me to restart. So now all this plugin does is it defines this code review slash command. So it's a custom command written by a third party in the case of Anthropic, but basically it's not out of the box slash command. It's one that you install via plugin. So plugins are very easy to install. And this one is one that reviews code. I'm not sure if I can demo it because this one is not this repository is not I have to make a PR to do the code review portion. But I can kind of show you what that looks like. And then there's so other plugins is superpowers, which is good for like if you're doing a large task in Cloud Code, you can have Cloud Code brainstorm the task. So for example, come up with a plan of action on how to kind of decompose the task. And it'll tell you like which parts of the task decomposition are sequential, like this task should come before this other task, and then these tasks can run in parallel. And then once it has a plan, it can actually assign sub-agents to work on parallel on different tasks and different Git work trees, and then it'll merge the work trees together. So this is very good if you're like have a entire future that you want Cloud Code to implement. And you can have it work. Sometimes this runs for hours, but usually it does fairly good. I had to like probably change the code a little bit, but in general, like it saves so much time because you're basically offloading a huge feature, a huge project to Cloud Code to do that. If you were to give it to GitHub Copilot, it'd probably fail at. Yeah, and then it also has skills such as test-driven development. So test-driven development is writing tests before you write the code. And then basically doing like an iteration where it passes the code, or if it originally fails the test because it writes the test before you write the code, it writes the minimum code to pass the test, then it refactors that code, and then it iterates through the test again. So that's one of the skills it has is it actually enforces like test-driven development as opposed to other tools or using Cloud Code directly doesn't have is not a test-driven development mindset built in. There's a question if the quality of the model's output degrade when adding a lot of skills. So that's part of the benefit of skills is because it's you're doing lazy loading. It doesn't usually get overwhelmed with the amount of instructions that adding a ton of skills will have. So for example, like if you alternatively if you had like 10 different skills and you load it into the system prompt. In that case, your agent will have a difficult time because it's dealing with a whole lot of instructions. Some of them might conflict with each other. But if you were to separate those skills from the system prompt, part of the benefit is that it doesn't run into this instruction bloat because it can load the skills when it needs to load those skills. So in general, like doing a single run of the agent, it's not going to look at as much instructions as if you didn't have those skills. Or if those skills were in your system prompt instead of being separated into separate skills. And then there's context 7, which is also an MCP server. This can write documents such as MD files I mean, me as a developer that works in a development team, no one really writes documentation. So having something that writes documentation automatically for you is a plus. So I could probably demo superpowers, but it's going to take long to run, depending on the task. But I'll just kind of go over this example from the code review plugin. So I just typed in /code review and then I gave it a PR number. This is a different repository than the one I showed. And you can see it's quite small, but you can see which tasks it's doing. So it does things like it checks the PR eligibility, it checks the Claude.md files, it gets a summary of the pull request. And then it says it's going to run 5 agents in parallel, which is it's going to check if the change is compliant with Claude.md, meaning that there's nothing that in the PR that violates your Claude.md file. It's going to review for obvious bugs. It's going to look at the Git history, previous PR comments, code comment compliance. So actually, this PR comments is interesting because one of the developers on my team left a comment about not doing XYZ. And so I deleted that. And then in his next PR, he did the same thing. And then Cloud Code said that that the PR it referred to his previous comment in my PR, saying that it was violating that comment. So it's interesting. It was looking at comments from another PR, and applying it to the current PR that I was looking at. So this is an example. I tend to use Haiku because I think Haiku is fine for a lot of cases. But you'll have much better results with Opus. But I think Haiku has pretty good results generally. And also Sonnet is very good as well. But definitely Opus is much better. So yeah, so I guess we can also look at how these plugins are defined. So I can show examples. They're all like natural language definitions. So if you look at, I mentioned that Cloud Code or the code review plugin in Cloud Code is basically a slash command. So you can see like the slash command is defined here. And you can see like the slash command is basically just custom instructions that it's giving to Cloud Code. So when it does slash code review, basically it'll load these instructions to the agent, and the agent just follows whatever instructions are written here. And then it defines like things like agent 1 and 2 should check for Claude.md compliance. It should check for auditing changes. Agent 3 should search for bugs in parallel with Agent 4, which will look for problems that exist in the introduced code, such as security issues, incorrect logic. So Agent 3 is more for syntax. It seems like Agent 4 is like security issues or incorrect logic. And this is the extent of agent orchestration. Like agent orchestration is very like it sounds like a very intimidating term, but really what you think what agent orchestration is it's just custom instructions telling Claude to launch these agents in parallel. Like you're telling Claude in English to do this, and it'll do for agents in parallel that do these capabilities. So it's not rocket science. Like all of these agent orchestrations or having like an whole organization of agents that work under you sounds intimidating. It's very powerful, but it sounds like intimidating to set up. But at the end of the day, a lot of it is just telling Claude the instructions, like I want to launch these 10 agents. And then you describe what each agent does. You can also do that via skill as well. So I'll show superpowers as well. So superpowers will launch a lot of things via skill, whereas code review launches it via slash command in a lot of cases. Yeah, so you see that here there's like a whole bunch of skills. So if you're doing like the brainstorming skill, it'll tell you like how to approach brainstorming. But the most useful skill is the sub-agent driven design or driven development. So this will actually be launching sub-agents to do different tasks. And then a lot of you can think of this as like a flow chart of like basically an algorithm or conditional deterministic algorithm that's doing like if this is true, then do this. If this is not true, then do that. So it's basically giving an example to Cloud Code on how it should approach sub-agent driven development. So it needs it needs an implementation plan to do sub-agent driven development. But if the plan is not implemented, it'll do a brainstorm first. Otherwise, if the tasks are mostly independent, then it stays in this session. And then it does sub-agent driven development. So sub-agent driven development is if it knows the tasks can be executed in parallel, it'll actually assign each task to a different sub-agent. And so you can be running 8 different sub-agents that's doing 8 tasks at the same time. 8 coding tasks, and they'll merge them all together in the end. So yeah, this is a little bit more complicated than the code review because it's more of a general framework. Like in the code review one, it tells you it'll create 4 agents, sub-agents. And this one, it's a little bit more flexible because it can create as many sub-agents as it needs to do to do the task. And then these sub-agents are called implementers. So implementers are also defined via natural language or semi-natural language. So this is the implementer. It's basically telling it what it can and can't do, and what it's a template. So it'll fill in this template based off of the skill. So the skill will give the implementer which task it needs to do. It'll fill in this task and then it just hands it off to Cloud Code. So really, a lot of these agent orchestration capabilities are all like natural language descriptions. It's really like saying, I want an organization of these agents, and these agents are going to do X, Y, Z. They're going to have these skills. And that's the extent of of basically having like a whole bunch of agents work for you at the same time. Any questions? It's also like a lot of this you don't need to implement yourself, because if you do like if you install this plugin, you don't have to worry in a lot of cases about determining which agent does what exactly. But if you want more customizability, it's not too hard to customize because you can also tell Cloud Code like a vague idea of what you want to do. Like in the case that I showed here, I gave it a vague idea of the slash command, and it wrote like a very bare bones basic slash command for me. And I can just edit it to kind of customize, like, actually I want this instead of this. I want to add this to the command that hasn't been already mentioned. So it's really an iterative process. Yeah. So you can do like something like this. So I can install superpowers here. I'll just show just a brief example of superpowers. I'm gonna be on plan mode. A plan mode is basically a mode that won't execute anything. So it'll show you the plan. But it won't actually do the execution. So I want you to brainstorm a um hmm, what can I do with a shell? Hmm, I don't know what it's gonna do here. But it'll come up with a plan. So it's actually I have to exit first. Yeah, so it knows I used the word brainstorm, so it knows it should be using the skill superpowers brainstorming. So it's gonna look at yeah, it's gonna ask a bunch of questions like what do you mean by agents, AI command agents? Um, let's do special prefix. So it's gonna design like a whole system, and then once it creates the design, it'll offload it to a bunch of subagents. This might take a while though, so I won't show the whole process. But that's basically how the brainstorm capability works. Are there any questions on this? Um, I guess like what tools are people using? Um, if if you're using like agent orchestration, for example. Or are there any like plugins that you use that I haven't mentioned? Um, and also MCP servers. I haven't really talked too much about MCP servers, but I myself don't use a ton of MCP servers in Cloud Code. I use it in other contexts that are not Cloud Code. But I don't use it in Cloud Code just because it's very token heavy. Um, like yeah, the MCP server may return like a huge number of tokens, and that only not only makes it Cloud Code slow, but if you're using a model like Opus 4.5, it's going to be cost costly, or it's going to rate limit you a lot in certain cases. Um, I saw Codex. Actually, for some reason, I haven't used Codex that much, even though I probably should. Um, but yeah, Codex is also um very popular. That's OpenAI's coding model, and then you can also a coding interface, a coding assistant, basically. Um, I didn't mention this, but you can look at like if I typed in best coding models. Um, yeah, so there's a leaderboard for different coding models uh, on different benchmarks. So these are different data sets. Um, interestingly enough, for this best agentic coding, Sonnet 4.5 beat Opus 4.5, even though Opus is the more expensive model. Um, but Opus is fairly good across. I know it doesn't show up in a ton of these evals. Um, but generally like people consider it to be very good. And not all of these benchmarks build the same. Like Opus is not even evaluated on this code bench benchmark. Um,
So in the last couple of days, Kimi K 2.5 is showing up on benchmarks like with a really high score.
Yes, yes. Yeah, definitely. And then you can see like its performance on all of these benchmarks. There's like a math benchmark. Um, and then you can read about what these benchmarks mean. But generally, like, um, I don't always gravitate towards the most powerful model in general, but it's really like a trial and error, like which model works that's the cheapest. Maybe if you care a lot about privacy, you'll look at models that are deployable on your laptop. Um, so there's really like no like winner in terms of these models, but yeah, you do have things like Kimi that are really powerful. I would say uh, there's definitely models that I stay away from just because some of the models can't code at all. Or like when it codes, it's makes so many mistakes that it's actually better to not use the AI coding assistant in that case. But Opus, Haiku, Sonnet have all worked great for me. I don't have many complaints. And I if I use like GPT, I think I wouldn't have any complaints as well, or Gemini. Um, so it's all like maybe a matter of preference in that case. Um, or like for your specific use case, if you see a certain model messing up more than the other. Um, but in general, like I don't have any like hard recommendation. I'm not really opinionated on like, oh, you have to use this model. You like this model is the best out of all of them. At the moment, I think it's kind of saturated in terms of very good models. No model is perfect, but there's a lot of very good models. Yeah. Um, yeah. So I went over, yeah, so that's basically the end of the presentation. Are there any questions, ideas, if we want to talk about ideas for the next event as well?
I was wondering if this will be posted online later to rewatch.
Yeah, so we're recording the meetup. I think we can post it.
Okay, thanks.
I can also share these slides. I'm on the free version of Canva. I hardly make slides in Canva, but I think, yeah, I'll share the slides as well. And then, yeah, so if you have any ideas for the next event, there's this Hawaii Slack that you can look at. I don't really have like an online, like a Discord server for this meetup, or like a Slack for this meetup. So there's this Hawaii Slack that a lot of meetups are using, and then I post like events on here sometimes. But if you go to the Hawaii Machine Learning, this is like if you want to suggest ideas for like for meetups, this would be the place. So you can just comment directly on Meetup as well if you want to see an idea. Generally, like this group is a little bit more technical than other AI groups. It's not going to be like super technical in the sense that it only appeals to researchers. It's going to be applicable but technical. So that's kind of the objective of this group or the general audience.
For you, do you ever work with like more conceptual things when it like comes to like ethics and AI?
Yes, yes. So we
And
had sorry, go on.
go ahead. Yeah, I was just interested in what you guys do?
Yeah, so we've also had like more general conversations on ethics as well. Um, I haven't done one in a while, and the landscape has changed significantly. But that's definitely like something we've done in the past and talked about in the past.
With all of this, I see that like a lot of it runs like offline, or like basically the coding that it gives you with Cloud Code, it runs it offline. But is security wise, like when you put this stuff in here, does it actually learn off of what you're asking it and the input that you're giving it, or is it just kind of like a sandbox altogether? Like I'm
Mhm.
talking about like data going forward. Like if there's something about, like you don't want everybody to know this, or you don't want training data off of what you're developing.
Mhm.
Uh, it, is there like an opt-in, or does it do that?
Yeah, so there is like so Cloud Code does run online, like it talks to a model that's running online that's on Anthropic servers.
Mhm.
Um, and then usually unless you have like an enterprise deal with Cloud Anthropic, there's
Yeah.
no like strict, I don't know if there's a strict guarantee that they're not going to train on your data.
Right.
So that's like if you care about privacy, like
Yeah.
that's definitely one reason you might want to use like a local coding assistant like deep agents over Claude Code in terms of privacy.
Mhm.
The someone just posted something. Yeah, so
Yes, cursor. So cursor has the ability to turn it off.
okay, yeah. Cursor has the ability to turn it off. Yeah, I assume like Cloud Code also cares about that because no one would, not many people or not many companies would let their employees use Cloud Code if it didn't have a privacy guarantee.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, you have to manually opt out. Or if your company is providing you with Cloud Code, it's
Yeah.
probably opted out
Yeah,
already.
I've heard that with enterprise contracts
Yeah.
that's often built into the contracts, but I haven't really seen that for if you're just doing a private subscription on your own.
Yeah.
I haven't really seen that option, but it might be there. But has anyone had any good success with any of the local models to use any of those as coding for coding? Because I've not had good success with any of them. I'm just curious because there's a lot of
Yeah, I've
trash.
not had the best success.
Okay.
Um, but I'm not someone that's running a ton of LLMs on local computer. Um I haven't been using like local LLMs
Right.
extensively, so I'm not the best person
Yeah.
to to talk about like the success. I know some people have successfully done it, but it does take quite a bit of work um, for coding agents in particular. And then also like in terms of privacy, that's the reason why I know someone talked about Mobot, but Mobot is also kind of a security can be a security like hazard if it's not configured correctly. So either like if I'm going to use Mobot, there's kind of two options. Either I have to really deep dive into the configuration to make sure that there's no like attack path on my current laptop, or I should make a new what some people are doing is buying a whole new computer, whole new desktop just to run Mobot on it. Um, which is also good. I mean, it's also okay. Um,
Yeah, the other option is you host it like in DigitalOcean or something.
oh yeah, yeah. So like a yeah, you can also do it like on a cloud instance, something that if something goes catastrophic, it's not gonna like ruin your workplace or
Yeah.
anything. Um,
I was just curious. Does anyone have any opinions on this new bill that's going through in Hawaii about about these chatbots, and have you seen any of that? Do you know about that? So it's SB 3001 that's being discussed now. And one of the things is they're requiring any operators of conversational chatbots to take certain responsibilities, like to detect if there is any suicidal ideations with any of the conversations that the individual is having. There's certain protections for under 18, but they don't really, I don't know what the criteria is how you determine, the people under, if the user is under 18. So anyway, I was just kind of following along. The bill number is SB 3001. So I'm reading this piece. It was dated January 23rd, that I downloaded from the state of Hawaii. Yeah, I mean, there's some aspects of it that's really ambiguous, and so it seems like it would be hard to, it may be hard to enforce, but it also is, I think, asking some unreasonable things for some operators. But
When I look at it, I'm like, how and who is responsible? It doesn't really have a clear-cut guidance on that.
yeah, the
And
guidance, it's ambiguous, but it does say that the operator is responsible to
mm,
detect and report any
yeah,
suicidal ideation, right? And I mean, that's the thing that kind of was the red flag for me, and that was one of the issues. And there's some caveats. If you're running your conversational bot through a software package, you may be protected from that versus if you have it on a website. So there's some odd things. So I was just curious if any of you were kind of following along with that, because I've not actually seen that kind of legislation anywhere else. But Hawaii's trying to put that through right now. So and it has an impact in a lot of the things that I'm interested in, being in kind of an educational technology area, and with AI tutors and things like that. So I mean, that's in a kind of important area that I'm looking at. So that's the reason I was curious if you had any insight or any opinions.
Yeah, it's kind of vague.
It is really vague.
I, I
So
would hope it, like, to me, I feel like the legislator should reject it for the mere fact. Not that it might not be a good idea, but I think they should reject it for the mere fact that it just needs some more work.
Hmm
yeah,
Very,
yeah,
like, from what I can see, it looks pretty sloppy.
it is. Yeah, that's what I think.
Yeah,
Anyway,
yeah. Yeah, and then also if it's so vague, it might be hard to actually enforce
yeah, yeah.
practice. Yeah. Interesting.
And so Kiwi K25, I mean, that's only cloud available, right? There's no local. I mean, I know it's open source, but there's no local way to run it, right? Because I've looked at it on like Olama, and as far as you can tell, it's only on Olama Cloud.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think
I think it's on Hugging Face too, but I don't know if it's like too large for us
Yeah,
to
that may
reasonably
be what
run
it
it.
is. Yeah.
yeah, let's see.
And one thing I didn't realize is some of these open source models, some of them use a GPU and some don't. Is that kind of what you're aware of? Because I was surprised when I was playing with some of these, and I was just kind of monitoring my GPU usage. It was like
Yeah.
it's not using the GPU, and I didn't realize that would be the case.
Yeah, some of them don't use GPU.
Okay.
There's some that there's like a company that's claiming that they can run models locally by like partially loading the model onto the GPU. But I'm a little bit skeptical about how fast that
Yeah.
runs. Or like not load it onto the GPU, they'll load it locally onto your computer and run it via CPU. I'm like, I'm a little bit skeptical, like, is that gonna take like a whole day just to get a simple answer from the model?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, because I use local models a lot. I mean, I use it constantly. So I evaluate a whole bunch of them. But and I've often run a lot of code on, Linux machines. I have, old Windows machines that I, run Linux on, but none of them have GPUs. And so essentially the only machines that work effectively for me for these local models are either MacBooks that have M chips, M1 chips or later, or M1 Pros, or PCs with GPUs. Otherwise, it's just painfully slow to use
Yeah.
on anything. Even fast Linux machines with lots of RAM and all that, if it doesn't have a GPU, it's pretty worthless to run local models on. So and that's kind of the only downside to it. But I sort of advocate for local models, and I'm trying to get more people to use local models, and so that's what I've kind of been doing is trying that. I just haven't found any coding agents with local models that actually have been anything nearly as good as Claude. So
Yeah, that is true. Yeah, I haven't like explored the space of local models too much in general. But yeah, that's interesting. It is interesting too. Um, because I do like the promise of having like a local model for coding for coding
hmm
assistant.
right.
Yeah. I'm just looking at some of the questions. Yeah, so one of the questions is about how involved in the code development I like me as a developer who's using Cloud Code will be. Um, right now, like yeah, that is something that I still kind of struggle with. Um, I know people who like totally offload everything to Claude. Like they'll make huge pull requests that are like 65 files long because they use like something like superpowers to write like a whole new feature. I'm not quite in that mindset yet, just because writing huge PRs is traditionally like a bad practice, just because reviewing those PRs are going to be difficult, and also um yeah, like you would need I would need Cloud Code to review those PRs in general. Usually I try to make sure I know everything that Cloud Code is doing in terms of every piece of code that it's writing. Like I have a general idea of what its purpose is and what the objective is of each code snippet. Um, so manually I don't do a lot of the coding, but I'll look at like everything that Cloud Code is doing, and then manually review like all of those snippets. I won't review it like maybe line by line, but at least know, okay, this function is doing this. And then I'll tweak it manually. But I know people who will tweak it via Cloud Code, like they'll tell Cloud Code to tweak it for them. In general, I think maybe that does slow down my velocity, compared to other developers who are like all in on coding assistants. But I still like having some control over knowing what's being written and what's being committed. Because at the end of the day, if something goes wrong, it's really up to you to kind of um, root cause the issue and fix it. I'm a little bit uncomfortable with having something go wrong. Like, let's say if I push code into production and not knowing how the code works, um, or where to start when I find a bug, or if a bug is occurring. So in general, I'll be a little bit more cautious about reviewing things in Cloud Code. But that doesn't mean I don't use Cloud Code to also review the PR as well. I think Cloud Code is very slow. The code review tool I showed, I'll use it for big pull requests. Like if someone makes like a maybe 15 file plus pull request, I'll use Cloud Code in that instance because it takes like 30 minutes. Even for 2 files, it can take like 15 minutes. Because it's doing a whole lot of like sub agents and running agents in parallel. It's a little bit overkill for like small PRs. So for small PRs, I won't run Cloud Code, the code review tool. For larger PRs, I will. For small PRs, I'll just review it manually by hand or manually. We also do use Copilot for reviews. I find Copilot to be good in a lot of cases, but in general, Cloud Code is better than Copilot at doing the reviews. At least the Cloud Code plugin is a lot better. And the reason why I say that is Copilot can be noisy, like it can point out like a whole bunch of issues, some of which are valid, and then some of it are not valid, are false positives. So it's a lot more noisy than Cloud Code. And then also it doesn't one thing that Cloud Code does is it the plugin will look at different issues that it finds in your PR, and that it'll actually rate them in terms of if it's actually severe or if it's just like maybe a coding style thing. Whereas Copilot doesn't have that scoring. So right now I use Copilot to review everything just to get a second opinion. But for small PRs, I won't use Cloud Code. For large PRs, I will use Cloud Code to review. In terms of development, I use Cloud Code for everything. If I'm creating like developing code. But yeah, at the same time, I have to make sure that I know what it's doing. And then also I try to manage the PR size so that it's not like a 65 file PR. Because I'm also a little bit uncomfortable with pushing that big of a PR. If that makes sense. And actually with superpowers is very good. Like it's saves me a ton of time. But at the same time, it is hard to control like the size of the pull request that it's making. Yeah, any questions? Any other questions? Otherwise, I think we can call
Hey,
it.
I just wanted to say thanks for the presentation. It was really good, and I appreciate you answering that question for me.
Oh yeah, thanks for asking it. Yeah. Definitely like there's still a lot of optimizations I want to make in my workflow. Like there has been like other presentations like I think Mickey or is that her name? She the CEO from Alolo Intelligence has done like presentations on AI coding. In particular, like she uses Cloud Code probably a lot more than I do, but it's also different circumstances. Like I think if you're to use Cloud Code in a startup where you have to build a lot of the infrastructure from the ground up, Cloud Code you can offload a lot of things to Cloud Code. You can offload like a ton of the design decisions, for example, to Cloud Code. And I think that's fine with like a company that is in the startup phase. But if you have like a platform that you need to integrate into that is very established, then in that case, like having Cloud Code make a huge like 65 file change may not be the best practice.
Okay.